Hello and welcome to the first session of Karen's Colours for 2026. This is going to be one of those monthly colour forecasts, but before embarking on a reading for January 2026, I'd like to remind us all that this is a traditional time to review the past year before setting out our goals and resolutions for the upcoming year. If you've already done those resolutions, then maybe you might like to consider them in the light of what I present today. We're going to be examining the progress made, the setbacks encountered, the challenges that we've overcome, and the work that has been left undone. But before we begin, thank you once again for attending this session. I know that there are not many of you that do so, but I'm certainly hoping that those of you who do will get something positive out of these readings. The reading itself is going to be rather truncated because I'll spend most of the time looking at 2025 in review. We're going to be examining the colours of the main skills and experiences that you've had, the colours of the primary blockages or deficits that have afflicted you throughout the year. And the review will encourage you to think where you're going to go next. There'll be creation of New Year's resolutions that are involved, but those, of course, are very personal to you. And of course, because we make New Year's resolutions, there are lots of goals to be set, lots of ideas about where we want to go next. There is an importance in reviewing past experience so that we can create a future path. And that future path will be denoted by one colour card for January 26. And I'm going to also give you an oracle card to help guide the way. But otherwise, the reading will be extremely truncated. Certainly, enjoy. Well, now we're up to October birthday people. How did 2025 look for you? You began the year in February, when I started these readings, with two colours that were dominant, red and orange. Now, red is all about energy, and you had them in the internal world. So you were frustrated. There were things that you wanted to get done, but for some reason or other, there were restrictions. Red always says stop. On the other hand, you also had orange. Now, orange is confidence and courage and the ability to weather storms, to be able to overcome issues as they arise. By March, that had changed, and now you were in a phase where you were carrying yellow and green as the dominant colours. Yellow, all about joy and anxiety, depending on how you feel about things, and green, all about opportunities and values that need to be reconstructed. By April, you were back to dealing with that crisis of confidence, having to stand up and be counted, and this time it was all about cyan and red. Red, that frustration that you had back in February, also reared its head, but this time it was a case of how do you consolidate your energy and your drives and your ability to carry on regardless into something that will cause you peace and harmony and comfort. By May, that comfort had now begun to dominate. It occurred 3 times during the month. Yellow also was a very dominant colour. And here the idea was that you were going to learn something new. So maybe you took on some study, maybe you just simply began to see the joy in life. But whatever it was, you were comfortable and you were happy. In June, however, that changed dramatically. There was a situation where you were drawn between two extremes. Black and white as dominating colours are always uncomfortable. One leads you to exciting new opportunities that are dazzling but may not actually be what they pretend to be. And on the other hand, there is the black end where you are cautious to the extreme and don't really want to proceed at all. In the middle of all of this was brown. Now, brown here was the dominating colour. And brown is all about goals and practical skills. What did you want to achieve out of life? What did you want to learn in order to be able to carry forward? In July, you decided to reorganize yourself. Here was a lot of duty and responsibility and the need to nurture either yourself or others that began to dominate. And by August, that had turned into a ritual of you maintaining a stability, you perhaps even bored at the same time as you were trying very hard to learn something new, but to do so in secret. The black says, I don't want people to know what's going on. You may even have felt a little bit isolated at this time. By September, there was shock and confusion as a result of you suddenly making some sort of realization. There was enlightenment that happened here. What is it that you really want out of your life? And are you in fact heading that way? But the trouble is the gray that came up here, and gray is a fairly important color because it appeared both as itself, but also in that underlying energy combination of white and black. Here, there is confusion, uncertainty, and need for stability, for finding a middle road between the extremes of what you were experiencing. In your birthday month of October, you began to withdraw. You began to hide the fact that you were in a crisis state. You'd had the courage and the confidence to keep moving on, but you didn't want people to know that this was, in fact, a crisis for you. There were things that you wanted to stop. There were things that you didn't want to continue doing. But in the real world, it was a matter of continue on as though nothing has changed. By November, that had definitely changed. The orange had swung over to blue. Now you were doing what you needed to do in order to just maintain stability and organization. There was no way of preventing yourself from just simply doing your duty because your duty had to be done. But at the same time, there was this underlying nagging of the gray, which said, do you really want to do this? Do you really want to continue doing what you have been doing? And by December, a decision had been made. White and pink as dominating colors are always about justice. It's about getting your just desserts. You've decided, you've made a decision, you have let the universe choose for you if necessary. You've simply allowed yourself to become vulnerable to whatever is out there that is going to lead you to a brighter path. And so you did the right thing for yourself. So what then was the color that was dominating throughout the year? Well, by far it was white. White is all about curiosity, it's about experience, and it's about shock. You were curious about what was out there that was different from what you were already experiencing. The experiences that you were having were enlightening ones. You were finding yourself actually enjoying being out there and doing something different. But it was also a shock to the system because it meant that you had to relinquish something in order to follow this bright light. So what then were the issues and problems that you were trying to avoid throughout the year? For October people, you began the year with a number of baseline issues, which by March became 4 problems that raised their head as a more common or more frequent. They were black, blue, grey, and cyan. Depression over the duty that you needed to do, uncertainty about how you were going to find happiness and peace and serenity. But these are issues you didn't want to deal with. And by April, you dropped the idea that serenity might be something you could be looking for and just simply maintain that avoidance of the depressed state that came as a result of you constantly having to do things because that was your stable background. By May, it had all turned into grey, uncertainty, confusion, not knowing exactly what you want. And that was maintained throughout June and July and August and September and your birth month of October and also November And it still was there in December. You still weren't 100% sure that you were doing the right thing, but at least in December, you had added another conflict that you needed to deal with, and that was, what are you going to do next? What are your goals? What are you going to have to learn in order to achieve something different in your life? Those are the struggles you were dealing with. And of course, those two colors are also the ones that predominated throughout the year. Brown and grey were pretty much on par with one another as throughout the year. Brown was goals, practical skills that were seen to be missing. There was lack of ambition or determination to succeed in any one area, and you didn't feel very grounded or stable. At the same time, that inability to be grounded or stable caused a feeling of insecurity, a certain degree of confusion. There was imbalance, there was uncertainty, and you tended to procrastinate rather than be objective about the things that you wanted to achieve. In fact, you weren't even certain what it was that you wanted to achieve. So all in all, the year showed that by following your curiosity, by following the bright light that flashed in front of you, the enlightenment, the sudden realization that things could be different, was distracted by an inability to settle on a specific goal or to find that middle road, that balance that was necessary for you to move forward. Now, in order to look at what you might need to find that balance and that certainty that will enable you to develop goals that are both practical but also fulfilling, we're going to look at a single color card for 2026, the beginning of the year. But also, I've chosen the Soul's Journey Oracle from James Van Praagh. Now, this particular oracle involves a number of cards that have little affirmations or meditations that you might like to consider as you move into the new year. But first, let's have a color card that will give us some guidance for people born in October to start off their 2026. A single card for 2026. And what we have here is cyan on yellow. Yellow internally generally signifies fears. It signifies anxiety and things that you need to learn, things that you need to recognize to find joy in, instead of feeling as though you are in a state of paralysis. On the other hand, the cyan in the real world says, let's make things stable, let's calm things down. Let's feel as though we are in a state of bliss and comfort and that everything is okay with the world. So what this card is asking you to do is to find the joy that will enable you to feel settled and as though everything that you want in your life is going the way that you want it to go. Looking for a oracle card to go with this, let's have a look at what it says. All right, it says fear. The affirmation is, I realize that I'm testing my resolve to live in the energy of love. Well, fear is, of course, what that yellow is all about. So, are you in fact testing your resolve to live in the energy of love? Cyan isn't exactly a color of love as such, but it is a color of harmony, a color that denotes everything in its place, exactly the way things should be, that enable you to feel comfortable in every way. So maybe that's what these two refer to. Not love so much, but definitely comfort and harmony and bliss. And if that isn't love for yourself, what is? Well, I hope you received something positive out of that annual review and have taken on board the small color reading and affirmation as a guide towards 2026. Certainly, looking at these readings from an annual perspective, a retrospective, I've come across a number of insights, both for myself, but also on behalf of those people that I know that have birthdays in the various months that I have been reading for. And one of the things that's come up here is whether or not I would even bother to continue with these. I feel hopeful that I should. I also feel as though I need to make some alterations. If you can think of suggestions that might make these more user-friendly, if you've been following the readings at all, you might even find that there's something in them that you might like to comment about. And I'd really appreciate those comments, because right now I'm in a dilemma, which is why I haven't actually done a full reading for every month, for every birthday month for January. It all depends on the results of this reading as to whether or not I continue. I have a lot to contemplate. My black is quite prominent too. Anyway, if you're new here and you haven't actually seen these before, you might think they're a bit confusing. That's part and parcel of a colour reading. It's something that most people will never have experienced. So I wish you all the best for 2026, and hopefully we'll meet again for more colour readings. If not, plenty of other things I can talk about that have to do with colour. Until next time, bye.